This is the Monstrum Banshee 1-6, and it's only $150. Surprisingly, it ain't trash. All right, fellas, gather around because today we're diving deep into the mystical world of budget optics with a name that sounds like it got conjured up during a Halloween marketing meeting. Yes, you heard that right. Monstrum decided to name the scope after a mythical creature known for screaming at people until they die. A bold choice for a company selling precision optics, don't you think? Maybe they wanted to scare up the competition, or perhaps they're just huge fans of Irish folklore. I don't know. Either way, let's strap in, flip those lens caps open, and see if this Banshee is a hauntingly good deal or just a spectral disappointment. First things first, the unboxing. Now, I wasn't expecting much for $150, maybe a cardboard box with some bubble wrap, but Monstrum kind of surprised me. The Banshee arrived in a sleek black box adorned with their logo, which sort of looked like someone just discovered clip art. Opening the box, I was greeted by the scope. Nestled snugly into cutouts included were the Banshee LPVO itself, which comes in at 17 ounces, which is not bad. It's the same weight as the other budget scope, the Primary Arms 1-6 Nova, which we'll reference throughout. Flip-up lens caps, which feel like they might survive a gentle breeze. A microfiber cleaning cloth, which you never end up having when you really need it, and an instruction manual written in what appears to be actual English, but it's bare bones, so there's a lot missing. So you kind of have to figure out a lot of things on your own with all that money you saved. Speaking of money saved, you do get a scope mount with this optic, which is great. And how about some instructions to mount this thing with some recommended torque values? Nah, we'll just keep tightening until something breaks. Seriously though, I did finally locate it on their website under the scope specs. Of course, when I started tightening down the screws, one of them stripped right away. So what did you really expect for a $20 scope mount? So don't use it and put it in a good mount like this worn 30mm X-Scale. Now the moment of truth. Looking through the darn thing. At 1x magnification, the Banshee claims to offer true 1x performance suitable for both eyes open shooting. Given its pricing, you'd think you'd be looking through the bottom of a Coke bottle. So in actuality, how close is it? Well, once you dial in the diopter, I found the glass quality at 1x to be not bad at all. It's close enough to 1x without significant distortion or any of the obvious, oh my God, what's wrong with the scope feelings. There's only a little bit of fogginess toward the outside, especially when the light is hitting it from the front lens. If you compare this to the Nova, the glass differences are not too obvious at 1x, although the PA glass is slightly clearer if you look close. But the most obvious difference is that the Nova's field of view is quite a bit wider with less scope body intrusion, so you'll have less of the I'm looking through a scope feeling. At 1x, you can get away with a lot when it comes to glass, but once you crank up the magnification, that's when you really start to see the imperfections. So as you start stepping through the magnification levels, the center will hold its clarity, but it's the edges that kind of turn to mush. Even at 3x, you can see the milkiness setting in, and it gets worse once you get to 6x. There's your Coke bottle right there. If you put this side by side with the Nova, you can kind of see what a decent scope is supposed to look like once you crank up the magnification. While it's not perfect, the Nova does a much better job with its detail and clarity and contrast. But then again, just remember this scope is $150, so what are you expecting? Speaking of expectations, this scope has something that only one other budget scope possesses. The Banshee boasts a daylight bright reticle. But just be aware that since Monstrum has several different Banshee models, it's only the BDC-C1 that's daylight bright. How well does it work? Well, the illumination settings range from, hey, is this thing on, to just barely enough for a summer's day. So at dusk or low light, the reticle performs well, guiding your aim like a lighthouse in a storm. But at high noon, even with the brightest setting, it struggles a bit against the sun's daylight rays. In comparison, you can see that the Nova has no issues as the center reticle blooms quite a bit to make it larger, and it's still quite a bit brighter than the Banshee. The illumination on the Banshee kind of reminds me a lot of the Leupold VX6, as that optic also crossed the line into daylight bright, but just barely so. Even with that limitation, I think it's still worth turning it on during the day. For controlling the brightness, there's only 6 settings on the illumination control, so you don't get as many as others. That's not that big of a deal since you're most likely only going to run it at 1 or 2 and 6 at the maximum. There's also an off position in between, although it's kind of weird that they marked it with a big 0 instead of a dash. So if you're looking at it from afar, it's kind of hard to see what level it's in unless you get really close. Having said that, the dial does have the right amount of friction, so once you do set the setting, it won't move. So adjusting these turrets is an experience akin to tuning a radio from the 1950s. Each click is a little mushy and lacks the tactile feedback you expect from a precision instrument. Don't get me wrong, they do click. But you'll notice that the vertical hash doesn't really align well with the turret markings. I know, it's a little bit of a pain. Once you do get your desired adjustment, you can re-index the 0 mark by loosening the hex nut at the top. Just pray that you only have to do this once because it's a pain to loosen that turret and pull straight up without actually turning the turret itself and losing your last adjustment. And as mentioned earlier, you'll have to set the turret down while doing your best to align with the zero, which is always a little bit off anyway, which is really annoying. Having said all that, zeroing the Banshee turned out to be pretty straightforward. The turrets are marked 0.5 MOA per click, and when I had to move it 4 inches 100 yards, turning it 8 clicks, moved it 4 inches. So the turrets are turning true, even though they don't feel great or durable during their adjustment. The turrets are low profile, they do a cap, so once you set your zero, put the caps back on and don't dial, use the BDC instead. Taking the Banshee out into the wild, or at least the local shooting range, I put it through its paces across various distances, courses of fire, and lighting conditions. At close ranges, the 1x setting functions almost like a red dot with its daylight bright illuminations, so it allows for a quick target acquisition. There's no fisheye effect or anything like that, so you can use this sight as 1x in place of your red dot. The scope body isn't as slim as the Nova 1-6, so it's closer to the experience of shooting like a Vortex PST when it comes to that. So if you crank up to 3x or so, it performs pretty well for targets past 50 yards. So if you're looking for headshots, use the intermediate magnifications. And with 3.8 inches of eye relief, it's comfortable to get behind the scope, so you won't have any problems with scope shadow. You can run a strong side or support side with no issues. You do lose about 0.3 inches of eye relief, not super noticeable, as you zoom up, so the scope doesn't have constant eye relief. Speaking of which, you better have plenty of time to switch magnification because this dial does not make it easy. It's stiff, almost as stiff as the Vortex PST. There's an integrated fin that comes with it, but unfortunately, it makes it worse since you can't remove it and replace it with a taller throw lever. It's also kind of strange that some of the mag levels are inscribed here with half levels, like 2.5 and 3.5. I never run into that need, so maybe some of you OCD guys can chime in here. So for long range shooting, you can use any of the 3 reticles, but remember only the C1 is daylight bright. Knowing this, the crosshair reticle is similar to the Vortex PST and Razor in that only the center dot is illuminated. Crosshair BDCs can work really well for long range as long as you don't need range targets with the reticle and there's not too much wind. All you have for wind are these long hashes for your drops, and they work okay. I think these long hashes are also intended to range shoulder width heights out to 700 yards, similar to an ACOG. However, when I was like lining it up with like a 300 yard IPSC, it was like a little bit off, a little bit long. As far as the drop ladder, one of the issues with the BDC that has calibrated a certain ammo velocity. As you saw during the unboxing, none of that is mentioned in the manual, so you only get a recommended 0 distance with some estimated drops. Luckily, I was able to get the subtensions from their customer service for the other reticle, the B1. Supposedly it's the same as the C1, so neither of these reticles are in Strelic or Chairgun, so you have to go off the table view or type in your distances and check the drop in MOA yourself. So I put those provided BDC subtensions to the test, and shooting 69 grain at 27-22 out of a Criterion 16-inch barrel, my holes are very close to the recommended distances. The differences were only about 10 to 20 yards apart with each hash, so if I hold dead on, it should hit. 150. 200. Dead on. There we go. 300. 400. 500. And then 6 all the way over here. So in summary, here are the pros and cons. Pros: it's affordable. At $150, it won't empty your wallet or force you to live on instant noodles for a month. It's got decently solid construction, so it feels durable and dependable. It's not going to explode on you, I promise. And it's versatile. So with a 1-6 daylight bright reticle, it's suitable for both close and mid-range shooting. Cons: edge clarity at high magnification isn't that great. You can see quite a bit of blurriness around the periphery. It's not great at 6x. Even though it is daylight bright, just remember in really bright conditions, you might struggle a little bit to see the dot. Who's this for? If you're a new shooter, it's great for those just starting out who don't want to invest a lot up front. Also, if you have multiple rifles, it gets expensive equipping multiple rifles, so this might make a decent training rifle choice. Who's this not for? If you're an optic snob and you're accustomed to high-end glass, every little deficiency in this scope is going to bug the hell out of you. If you're a long-range shooter, it's not the best choice for precision shooting beyond 400 yards, just like other crosshair BDC reticles, especially with a 6x on this scope, which is kind of a little foggy. So in the end, this scope is like that indie band you stumble upon that isn't quite polished, but it has a certain charm. It may not top the charts or win awards, but it does offer some enjoyment and definite value. So should you buy the Banshee? If you're in a market for a sub $200 LPVO, this is the best one available, no question. Just know that for a little bit more money, you can get the more capable primary arms 1-6 Nova, and to me, that's the better play. That's it for me, fellas. Thanks for joining me in this video. Check out the comments below if you're interested, and see you guys again next time.